to the September 13th, 2024 meeting of the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board Governance Committee. Just a quick note that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and should we find the live streaming fails, we will endeavor to get it back up online. If we can't do that in an expeditious manner, we will rely on the recording of this meeting as evidence of the meeting having been held in public, which would be posted to our website as all meetings are. I'll provide now a brief land acknowledgement, and as ever, those of us who are very fortunate to live together in Treaty 7 territory in Mohkinstsis are always, I like to reflect on just how truly fortunate we are to live where we do and when we do. It is not always perfect here, but I think if we look at what's happening in other parts of the world, we should look with real gratitude as to our particular place in the world, and reflect on our work that we do here around the CMRB table to make things even better for current and future residents of the region. And a big part of that is sharing the land, working together, and acknowledging the history back through millennia of people who have always gathered on Mohkinstsis, which is the traditional Blackfoot name of the place we now call the confluence of the Bow and the Elbow River. We're honored to be in the traditional territory of the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Amskapi, Pikuni nations of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina Nation of Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Goodstony nations of Stoney Nakoda, and the Otemiskwak Métis government of the Métis Nation. Our region is part of the Battle River Territory, which includes the Rocky View and Foothills districts, as well as the districts of Calgary Nose Hill and Calgary Elbow. And with that, the agenda is before you and has been distributed. Anyone have any comments, questions, edits, or amendments to today's agenda? And if there are none, I will invite a motion, please, to approve the agenda. Mayor Thorne, thank you. Do we have a second? Councillor Schmidt, thank you. Any debate or discussion on adoption of the agenda? And anyone wishing to vote opposed by exception to adoption of the agenda? Seeing, hearing none, that carries. Thank you very much. Same question for the minutes. You've had a chance to read them. Any edits, amendments, questions, or comments on the minutes from our meeting on the 3rd of May, 2024? It's been a while since we've been together. And if none, I'll invite him, please, to adopt the minutes. Mayor Janung, thank you. And Deputy Reeve Koken, thank you. Any debate or discussion on that? And by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to adoption of the minutes? And that carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Councillor Putmans is representing the city at a, Councillor will be here. He's just having some technical issues. Okay, so Councillor Putmans is endeavoring to join us. We anticipate he'll be here hopefully soon. With that, Acting Chief Officer Jamie Graves will take us through actuals for Q2. Jamie, to you.
Thanks, Chair Clark. Good morning to the committee. Agenda page 7 has the printout of the Q2 actuals, and for the most part, we are in on budget, with the exception of the professional fees, which shows a variance, but that's because we received the invoice for the Q2 audit, or sorry, for the audit in Q2, and that represents a larger portion of the annual budget for professional fees. And beyond that, I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.
The dreaded on mute. Councillor Petro, you are up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, this is going to be, it might be a really stupid question. It just looks weird to me and I don't know why. And if it is a stupid question, I'm blaming the antibiotics. The GOA grant line, I'm just wondering why there's no year-to-date variance, because we haven't received that yet. So I'm just wondering why there's no variance listed in the first line of that. It just looks odd to me.
That's a good question. I think it is because we know that we generally don't receive it in Q2. And so it's likely budgeted in the later stages of the year, but I can also have a look at that in more detail before it heads to the board.
That
Okay,
is
thanks.
exactly, Jamie, as it is the variance to Q2 budget, and Q2 budget was 0, grant was 0, and therefore the variance is 0. So you're exactly right. It's a sequencing issue, and I think we budget that to land in Q3, I believe. So yes, that's exactly what it is. Okay, Reeve Miller, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we blow that up a little bit? I just had a question on our office space. Again, I'm a little concerned about the time our staff spend in the office, and do we really need an office? And are our employees working mostly from home and not in the office, or what's the status of how much we use that facility?
Yeah, thanks, Reeve Miller, for the question. I would say on the large majority of time is spent in the office. I know, speaking for myself, I almost always work from the office, and I know a couple of my colleagues do as well. And certainly we do use all of our facilities like the copier and that kind of thing. So we're definitely using the space that we have. And we did, when we moved here, or at this space about a year ago, we did reduce the square footage. And so we're making better use of all of the space that we pay for. So, and in general, the lease costs are reduced year over year.
All right. Yeah. And I was told that we have a better boardroom in there, but are we ever going to use it as a CMRB board, because we meet at member municipalities now? So I assume you'd be using it for your employment, your hiring process, all those things.
I can't speak to the hiring process as I'm not involved, but generally speaking, we do have, as you know, like you mentioned, board meetings at member municipalities, and Chair Clark can speak to the rationale, which I understand to be as an opportunity to get out and see the region and for folks to see where they work, live, and play. But generally speaking, the meetings that we do have as administration are held online. And from time to time, we are intending to get together for those meetings. And yes, we were having in mind to spend more time in the boardroom that we do have here. So, but that's sort of at the discussion with the TAG group. So.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Reeve Miller, maybe I'll just provide a little bit of color to that. The boardroom in the actual physical spot of the CMRB offices is smaller than the previous office, and the footprint of that office is smaller. There was a chair's office in the previous location. There's not in this one, which I think is appropriate. I don't tend to spend a lot of time, but I do meet with the team on a regular basis. At least every other week we get together in person. The team has a regular in person. And I actually think the meeting, the office space story is probably a pretty good illustration of administration taking sharpening their pencil when the previous lease was up and finding functional office space, but a smaller footprint to reflect, as we've evolved, exactly what we need. If anything, there's maybe a risk that if at any point we were to add staff, we would have a challenging time scaling to any further footprint. And we, as Jamie said, the lease cost itself is cheaper, and we got a lease holiday for 6 months, Jamie, as part of this as well. So overall, the lease costs are down, in the order of 10 or 20%, I think, from our previous lease, which I think is frankly, I think a pretty good news story on admin side. So I just wanted to provide that context, and everyone's welcome to come visit anytime as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sure. If I had the address, I would probably do that. Thanks.
Yeah. Happy to share that, and so yeah, anytime. We're always happy to have you over. Anyone, anything else on the Q2 actuals? And if there are no more questions, I will invite a motion then that the committee receive for information and recommend for review by the board the 2024 Q2 actuals. May I, member willing to make that motion? Councillor Petro, thank you. And a second. Mayor Janung, first in. Any further discussion on that motion? And then a show of hands, please. All those in favor of that motion? Any opposed? None. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the proposed budget for 2025. Jamie, you're up again.
Thanks, Chair Clark. So agenda page 9 shows the proposed budget for 2025. And this is being brought to the Governance Committee today due to the upcoming 2025 budget deliberations for member municipalities that are expected in October and November. And the upcoming budget for CMRB requires member municipality contributions. And so we wanted to ensure that the members have the information they need to inform those internal discussions. The approach that I took on this was that the proposed budget is based on the total forecasted 2025 budget that was presented in 2024. So that was forecasted. And so we held at the 1.975 million. And the reason for that is that the organization right now is in transition with the departure of the chief officer and the ongoing recruitment efforts. So the new person that comes may want to have a look at this, but for the purposes of getting the information that member municipalities need to have those budget discussions internally, wanted to make sure that you had the information that you require. So the CMRB, as you know, has been partially funded by an Alberta Community Partnership Grant since inception. And over time, the funding to the organization had been reduced to $1 million per year. And the member funding formula was approved in October of 2023, which was the product of many years' work with CAOs, the Governance Committee, and the board. And when the board approved the funding formula in 2023, it also asked CMRB admin to work with interested member municipalities and report back by Q4 if a more appropriate funding formula exists. However, the member funding formula was not required in 2024, and consequently, the formula has not been tested. And so CMRB admin are recommending that we report back to you in 2025 after the funding formula gets used for the first time. As you can see in the notes, the 2025 budget includes a number of assumptions, and one thing that had not been previously budgeted for in the past was increases in the salary line related to increases in CPP rates, so Canada Pension Plan rates that came into effect in 2025. The changes were, as I understand them, decided on in 2023, but there's a certain portion that increases in 2024, and now we're about to have a larger increase in CPP rates. So that is included in the 2025 budget. So that's why that line item is a bit larger than previous. And as the interim chief officer, I'm not privy to the salary information, and so I relied on the accountant for support in the staffing salary expenses. And of note is that the budget presented assumes that the chief officer role can be filled at the same salary. So as I mentioned earlier, budget 2024 included member contributions that were not needed, and a number of regional initiative projects were completed in-house in 2024, resulting in a decrease to the spend in 2024 of regional initiative budgets. However, the 2025 regional budget is back up to previous years, as our Regional Transportation and Transit Master Plan Part 1 project should be kicked off this year, which represents the largest portion of the regional initiatives budget. And on a final note, an adjustment I would like to make to the budget is that is before you today, is that before the committee, what this budget was circulated, I didn't have this information, but following the circulation of the agenda, we received notice of a revised interest rate for the HISA after circulation of the agenda. So if the government's committee is okay with it, I'd like to revise the revenue line for the interest in the GIC from 54,000 for the year to 40,000, which is more likely given the interest rates are falling. And that difference in revenue would have to come from member municipality contributions. So something to consider. Those are my opening comments, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to answer questions from the committee.
Jamie, thank you so much. Appreciate the overview of the proposed 2025 budget. And with that, I will open it up to members for questions or comments. Deputy Reeve Koken first, followed by Councillor Petro. Don, go ahead. Oh, we're on mute there, Don.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
That's all right. We got you. Yep.
Okay. I had a brief review of this budget proposal, and I'm sort of curious as that we're asking for the full amount as pretty well compared to 2024, but 2024 we were 25% underspent. So why would we need the full amount for 2025 if we are not spending our full allocations from the previous year budgets?
Thanks for the question, Deputy Reeve Koken. This is used in order to make estimations for a worst case kind of situation, and we would revise the numbers if we were to need an additional or if we were to not need as much of the member contributions. So that's how that would work out.
Okay, so I guess
also sorry, I just want the other piece. I guess I just want to make sure I've emphasized, and it's a very good question, and thanks for raising it. But what Jamie alluded to earlier, in 2024, a lot of the projects that were budgeted ended up being done in-house, as opposed to having those projects being done by external consultants. It was a lot of scoping work, and in particular, RTTMP and Jamie can enumerate the other projects are at a phase now where we are going to market for consultants, and so the estimate for external projects, which is a substantial expense on the budget, is reflected on the estimates of what we expect those projects to cost as well. So I just wanted to add that. Jamie, do you have anything you want to add, or frankly correct if I'm not right about that?
Nope, nothing to correct. Thank you, Chair Clark, for that additional information.
Okay, so another thing I was curious about is that we've got a fair amount of projects listed here, and some of them have been reviewed and vetted in 2024, but it's unclear to me as far as what should actually be proceeding. And I thought that the board was going to have a strategy session relative to indeed what they wish to continue to pursue on these projects. And once those goals for the different projects were identified, then we would actually come up with more of a budget projection as far as what's required for 2025. Because you got to remember now, the municipalities are going to be requisitioned for these dollars. So I think we've got to be mindful that let's maybe see as far as what indeed we can actually accomplish with the resources we have, and maybe pull back some of the requirements of these projects budgets that are listed here. So I just wanted to know if maybe perhaps what we should be doing is just receiving this as information and relying on the board to do a revisioning session as far as indeed what type of project loads are going to be required for the CMRB before we actually do a more defined budget for 2025.
Jamie?
Yeah, thank you. So when we created the budget, we really looked at holding those regional initiatives and at the same value. And when we looked at that value, we worked backwards. And so you may recall there were some other initiatives that we were intending to advance in 2025 about a year ago. However, we have done a lot of work behind the Regional Transportation and Transit Master Plan. We have a little bit of better sense of what that's going to cost. And we have done a review of what is absolutely necessary in order to proceed with all the information that we currently have from the board. And you're right, there is a strategy session coming up in October. But the timing of that was not really going to meet the needs of the member municipalities for their budget considerations. And so balancing those two things, we have put this forward as the organization's recommendation for how to consider what member contributions would look like in the future, what the budget will look like as we know it today. Obviously, the board can direct CMRB at any time to revisit the commitments, and we look forward to hearing more about that.
Okay. Well, I guess a heads up from my perspective is that my council, I'm mighty sure that they're going to want to understand as far as indeed what is going to be undertaken and planned and through the CMRB projects before they're going to be providing any funding to these projects. And I guess the question is, when is this requisitioning to the municipalities going to happen? Is it going to be after the details of the board gets decided as far as the project scopes and the dollars associated with it? Or are we going to be requisitioned based on a upfront planning budget that you're proposing here?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. The projects that we'd have in here are already committed to. So for example, the Indigenous engagement is already ongoing. The RTTMP project scope has been approved. The charter was approved. And so that, yes, we haven't yet hired a consultant for that, but that will be coming and through the board, as well as the charter for the population and employment, which feeds into RTTMP, has also been approved. And so we are in the process of getting a consultant for that work too. In terms of timing, the vision that we have is that we would do the requisition in early Q1 2025 with the benefit of knowing more about where we are at the end of 2024 and likely able to refine that member contribution line with more detail and information. So it would likely reduce as opposed to go any higher for sure. So that is sort of how we see that rolling out in the future. Definitely.
Okay, so Jamie, what I'm hearing is that you're saying the board will definitely approve the scope of all the different projects listed, and then you'll be able to come up with a more refined, detailed budget for that scope, and then that's when the requisitioning to the municipalities would occur.
We're trying to do it all at the beginning of the year because we know likely what's going to come. So yes, the budgets will be refined and fully formed, but the requisition part doesn't happen until Q1. So yes, there'll be more information to come.
Okay, because you know what I'm seeing looking at these lists, and I think the board is going to have to take a long and hard look at some of these projects and to see if the scope is even proper and whether or not we want to pull back on some of these items and or however they may be handled. Like Indigenous engagement, for example, I'm not sure what's being accomplished there. And if we're not accomplishing much at this stage, why are we still pursuing it? But I guess that's something for the board to decide, I guess, when they do their visioning strategy session.
It is, and maybe, you know, Jamie, I'll just ask this question. I mean, all of the budget that we have presented in terms of the project budget that we've budgeted is all based on board approved projects, right? So we have approval by the board of the work that we are budgeting for 2025. So the board has reviewed and approved Indigenous relations. The board has reviewed and approved RTTMP. The board has reviewed and approved population and employment, economic development, the other projects. So this is based, and just, and I'm saying, I'm phrasing this really as a question, Jamie, and maybe just confirm that that's in fact correct. The board has already reviewed and approved all of the projects that we have before us that have baked into the budget. Is that correct?
Yes, they're in some form. So not every single project has a charter necessarily, but yes, that we've received direction to do the work that is in the 2025 regional initiatives budget line.
Okay, just for clarity, is the board going to be looking and re-clarifying the scope of these projects this fall?
The scope of RTTMP has been reviewed already. The charter for Indigenous engagement was also already reviewed and approved. The water strategy hasn't come up yet. We don't know about that one. Same with framework KPI and data. However, a number of those pieces are done internally. So some of the budget for that is included in things like buying or purchasing specialized data from StatsCan and others. And population and employment, the board will have further information about the costs in future stages. So yes, to answer your question.
Okay, Jamie, I guess what I'm asking is that you sound like you've reviewed it on by project basis, but is the board going to see all the projects together and weight them accordingly as far as what should be proceeding and what can we afford at this time?
Yeah, our vision for the strategy session is to summarize what the direction we've heard and what we are currently working on. That's sort of the current state. However, just as a word of caution, there's a number of projects here that have like a longer timeline that major revisions to scope would have significant impacts, but we can hear more from the board at that time.
Okay, and when is the strategy session aimed for?
So it's October 25th is the date.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. That's that for me.
Great, thanks, Don. We've got Councillor Petro up next, followed by Mayors Thorne and then Janung. Councillor Petro, you're up. Go ahead.
Thank you. So through the chair, 2 questions for you. So number one, I'm just wondering if it would be possible or beneficial to have an attachment to this budget document, just breaking down all the member contributions with those 3 categories, just for ease of use as we're going into our budget deliberations. So that's my first question. Second question was just around the interest rate on the GIC. Do you know what the current interest rate is, Jamie?
Currently, I don't know what it is, but the future is going to be 4.8%.
Okay. No, I was just wondering because I have we ever looked at like our municipal organizations? Because I know even through, and Mayor Thorne, please correct me because you're far more knowledgeable than I am on anything with AMSC, but I believe like the HESA was at like 5.5 or something this year, and so the interest rates look quite a bit better. But have we ever looked into those organizations at all?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Petro, that is the HESA that we are using now.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Love it. Okay, then that's all my questions other than just if we can get an attachment with the breakdown as an attachment for the board. Yeah, thanks.
So that will be in the board package based on whatever we discuss and prove here today. Is that correct, Jamie?
Yes, that is correct.
Perfect. Great, thank you. Mayor Thorne, you're up. Go ahead.
I question Councillor Petro just asked was mine of just making sure the breakdown was there. And then just to reconfirm, Jamie, what the anticipated requisition, assuming the board approves or we approve member contributions, but what that anticipated, that'll get sent to all municipalities here in Q4, like before budget pieces, so that it can fall into budget deliberations. But your requisition to municipalities would actually occur in Q1. Is that what I understood you to say?
Yes, that is correct, Mayor Thorne. So we will have a better sense of that number following this discussion. And when we circulate the budget to the board, we would have a breakdown for each member municipality so that they can consider that information in their budget deliberations. And as you said, we wouldn't actually ask for or do the invoicing, if you will, until Q1 of 2025.
Alrighty. And then just to kind of reaffirm the projects that are listed here, this is all projects that the board has looked at scope, approved scope. We've said these are the we must do projects. Is that also correct?
Yeah, I mean, the one exception that I would note is that the CTF tag, sorry, not CTF tag, the Canada Transit Fund Integrated Regional Plan, we have to be invited to create one first. So we are just anticipating that. And so that is still to be determined, but we want to make sure that we have placeholder in our budget for 2025 in preparation of that.
Yeah, okay. And then in Yeah, okay. And then building on the strategic session, my understanding just to the, and this is partly for Councillor Coken from our Rocky View, is that that's where we're going to discuss if there's other initiatives that we think need to be added. In potentially we'll have our new CO in place at that time so that they have an opportunity to hear and maybe provide some things that they think should be vision, and we can decide if we're going to expand or our project scope. Is that an understanding for the strat session?
That's a great summary.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Janun, you're up next. Go ahead.
Most of what I was going to raise has been raised in the previous two questions asked. I guess maybe I'll just reaffirm, I think it would be very helpful to have the breakdown so that each of us could budget accordingly, which I understand is the plan. And just maybe to reiterate what Mayor Thorne's saying, building on what Councillor Coken was asking about, the board has multiple opportunities to review this on an ongoing basis. And what I really like that administration has done is has that, and I had to go back and look at one of our previous agendas, but it's the, where is it? Board Strategic Initiatives Update is a part of every single board agenda, as well as the Land Use and Servicing Committee agenda. So we look at those every single meeting. And to maybe give you a little more confidence, Dawn, we have had asked the questions of, is this absolutely necessary? Is this, can we, in regards to the Indigenous relations piece, it was actually me that asked that when we were in, I think it was Foothills County, asking about, can we pause this? Is this the right dollars to spend at this time? And so the board has been giving the initiatives that kind of eye, I guess, and lens that we're looking through as in the worst case is what we're trying to avoid is going to a requisition. So I think the budget I'm seeing in front of us is, while I thought 2025 is maybe higher than what I thought as far as the requisition funds, but I understand why they are, given the report today. Jamie, thank you for that. So in my opinion, I think we need to, it's prudent to budget worst case so that we all can budget in our own municipal budgets accordingly. And then hopefully that invoice that comes in Q1 is pared back and we can keep that as a surplus in our own funds. So it's reluctant, I guess, that I'm saying, yes, we're at that point where we need to wade into a requisition. However, it's not without putting pressure on the province to try and fund to a greater degree for us to see these initiatives come through. So I think we've tried everything, and this is now we're at the last resort. So I just wanted to give that color to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Janun. Mayor Dean, you're up next. Go ahead.
Thank you. Two things. One, I would just like to take a second to introduce the gentleman beside me. This is Councillor Warzanowski, who we appointed as alternate for this for when I can't come. Second, what happens with this group if we have if there is that surplus? So if there is that 25% over, as we were talking, so what happens within this group on that? What happens with that surplus?
Jamie, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so if we have a surplus, we are not for profit, so we want to just reduce the requisition going forward. So either we hold funds in our HISA and use it over the year because we don't get money until sort of, as Chair Clark was mentioning, Q3 from the grant. But ultimately, the money would stay with the member municipalities. Just reduce that value.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. I don't see any other hands up or anyone else in the chat. Any other questions or comments on budget 2025? And if there are none, I will invite a motion that the committee recommend to the board approval of the proposed 2025 budget. Anyone care to make such a motion?
I can, Richard Putmans.
All right, Councillor Putmans, thank you. Do we have a second on that? Mayor Thorne, thank you very much. And that motion is on the floor. Do we have any further discussion or debate on the motion to approve, recommend for approval 2025 budgets? And seeing none, I will ask then for a show of hands or an indication, please. All those in favor that the committee recommend to the board approval of the proposed 2025 budget. And those opposed? And none opposed. That's unanimous approval. Thank you. Okay, on to our next agenda item. A bit of a couple of the housekeeping, I think, items here. Jamie is going to take us through here discussion around our fiscal year end. Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Clark. So when thinking about the budget, thinking about current reserves and revenues and expenses and the confirmed project budgets, thinking about cash flow and the budgets that are, or the projects that are coming in 2025. And as the organization matures and we are attracting potentially grant funding from other sources, CMRB typically receives, again, that grant for $1 million from the APC Government of Alberta between September and November in the year. And that means that we're running on cash for a majority of the year, always respecting, of course, the reserve policy. The organization, as I mentioned, is maturing and evolving, and our initiatives are begin to engage with other organizations, other orders of government. And importantly, we're pursuing opportunities for partnerships and grant funds with Government of Alberta, with Government of Canada, which may reduce member contributions if we're successful. So if our project spending and our burn rate becomes choppy, the risk to cash flow issues increases. So right now, we don't have a tool for financing projects or front-ending the projects while we wait for receipt of those partner organization funds, but we do want to continue work, right? So in terms of timing, this isn't expected to be a risk for this coming year, but assuming the member funding contributions are received in a timely way. One way to mitigate the cash flow issue or question is to change the organization's year end to align with the provincial and federal government of March 31st. And that may ease the cash flow risk and also syncs up the timelines for grant reporting. So it would also mean that we would receive funds earlier in our fiscal year, putting less strain on cash flow and less risk to maintaining the reserve fund policy. So to do this, we would have to do a current year-end audit like we always do in December or at the end of December. So starting in January, and then we would have to do kind of what I would call a mini audit after Q1 with support from the Avail. So just to kind of contemplate this and give you a sense of order of magnitude, what is this going to cost? It's around $7,000. So following that, we would be set to complete our annual audit at the end of Q1 every March 31st. So just in researching this recommendation, I understand many government adjacent organizations do this, including the Edmonton Metro Region Board. So with that, Chair, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. Anyone have any questions or comments on the proposed revision of our fiscal year end to March 31? Right, seeing none, I'll just give you another chance if anybody has anything else. I see some thumbs up and some indications that this is a reasonable plan. Well, why don't we test that with a motion that the committee recommend to the board adjustment of the fiscal year end to March 31. Anyone care to make such a motion? Deputy Reeve Koken, thank you. Do we have a second? Councillor Smith, thank you very much. Any debate or discussion on that motion? And by a show of hands or other indication, please, all those in favor. And any opposed? None opposed, carries unanimously. Fantastic, thank you. Again, on another item of our favorite term, organizational hygiene, Jamie will take us through a discussion around formally dissolving the Policing Services Subcommittee. Jamie, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Clark. In 2019, the Land Use and Servicing Committee directed CMRB admin to form a voluntary subcommittee to examine models of delivering policing services in the Calgary Metro region. And at the time, the subcommittee had had a few meetings and intended to do sort of an internal review of the current state of policing at the time. But the work really slowed down during the pandemic. And kind of also, in addition, in October every year, we request member municipalities to notify us their appointed elected officials to the CMRB's committees and the board. And there has been no formal wind down process for the delivery of policing services subcommittee. So we continue to ask every year, even though there is no ongoing work. So consequently, we are recommending that the subcommittee be dissolved. And obviously, as a note, as always, should the board wish to stand up a committee in the future for any purpose, they can do so and have the discussion with the chief officer about resourcing that subcommittee or committee. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions on administrative hygiene.
All right, yes. Always looking for opportunities to streamline this stuff. So, Mayor Janung, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with dissolving the committee if it's not functioning. However, that leaves the question, is any work being done on this at all? Yeah, and that's what I anticipated the answer would be. And personally, I think that we're missing out if we're not doing some investigating on how a regional police service or how that could unfold. We did have some discussion about pooling the grant. I can't remember the name of it, the policing grant through the province. I forget the amount. I think it was around 40,000 per municipality. And we did ask Minister McIver way back if we could put them together and research this. So nothing has happened on that front, Jamie?
That's correct. Nothing has happened.
Okay. So maybe, I'm not sure how to proceed because I would hate to, I understand dissolving the committee if nothing's happening, but I think something should be happening. And maybe it's not the committee is the right way to approach it. Maybe it's, I'll wait to hear from my colleagues, but I would consider making a motion that the board consider some option in discussing the delivery of a regional police investigation. I'll reserve my comments until I've heard from others. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor John. Mayor Thorne, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Mayor Janung that I think there's some opportunity to potentially look at a regional police force. So maybe it comes into the strat planning session is where we should chat about it, of whether we want to proceed with that, because there is an opportunity from an other funding source in that if we all were able to apply for, which I've heard from Minister Ellis that we could all individually be able to pool. So if we took 8 of us at 40,000 each, I think is the number for the grant. You know, that's some decent money that we could add into the budget to look at regional policing and whether that's something we would even remotely want to look at. But I think it's worthy of a conversation at strat planning is probably where I think the conversation should occur, from my perspective anyways.
Okay, thank you. And Reeve Koken, Deputy Reeve Koken, followed by Reeve Miller.
Yeah, I'm going to take a different perspective on this. The CMRB, in my mind, is more for regional land use planning, and I think this policing, as far as what it means to the region, is basically a bit of scope creep, and I think it's better reviewed in some other element. So I don't think I could support as far as regional policing being part of the CMRB review. And I think I totally support that we dissolve this because nothing's progressing, and I think it's out of our mandate totally.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Reeve. Reeve Miller, you're up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would totally agree with those comments. And Foothills County has already received the grant funding, and it's $30,000. And we are already looking at our own policing within the county. So we've already spent and utilize that money. So I would give you a motion to dissolve this committee.
Okay, so Reeve Miller, would you wish to make the motion that is in the in the agenda package?
Yes.
That the committee recommend to the board policing subcommittee be dissolved. That is a motion. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Reeve Koken seconds that. Okay, so that motion is now on the floor for discussion and debate. Any further comments? I've got Mayor Janung, I believe. And Reeve Miller, your hand is still up, but I imagine that's from before, is it? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Mayor Janung, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the comments I've heard, and I also appreciate the, I guess the light being shone on, is this part of the CMRB's mandate? So in light of that, I like the suggestion that Mayor Thorne made, that, and maybe I would put an amendment on the motion to dissolve the committee, but to add this to the strategic planning discussion at the board level. And perhaps the flavor of that could be that we encourage member municipalities to go on their own to pool funds if they're available still, rather than put it under the mandate of the CMRB. But I don't want to lose the discussion, because I think with the discussion of a provincial police force, I mean, we all might be scrambling to do something anyways, but if we're doing it on our own, as Reeve Miller's indicated, then maybe this is something that we could take away outside of the CMRB. But I would still like to have the conversation at the strategic planning session.
Okay.
And maybe I don't need to amend the motion. Maybe that's already going to happen.
Okay, so Jeff, if it's all right, why don't we keep the conversation going here on the motion as is, see where we land, and perhaps then may or may not end up in a place where we amend. Is that satisfactory? Yeah, well, and I guess I could even remove my own amendment by saying I'll bring it up at the strategic session. Okay. Thank you. Well, yeah. I've written some words. If we end up getting there, we can test that as needed. Okay, we've got Councillor Petro followed by Mayor Dean. Go ahead, Tina.
Thank you. So through the chair, thanks for bringing that up, Mayor Janung. That's kind of where my thought process is that I'm okay with the motion that's here today to dissolve this. There's no point in keeping it going if there's no progress being made on it to this point. But having this conversation, this is a much bigger conversation that can be had today or at the board level. So bringing it up at the strategic planning session would be wonderful. I maybe have a little bit of a different mindset, that I think this regional work is where we find those cost sharing things, where we find those cost benefits. So to me, these conversations are very valuable. Maybe it's not the scope of the CMRB, but maybe it's a best practices sharing or a learned lessons sharing between member municipalities. So I'm really excited to hear how the conversation goes at strategic planning, but I'd support the motion from Reeve Miller today. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Mayor Dean, Manchester, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I apologize if I'm sounding like a bit of an echo chamber. Tina took the words right out of my mouth. I am wondering, though, to Mayor Zhang's point, it might be redundant. I know he has said that he's committed to bringing this back at the strategic level, but what if instead of an amendment to this motion, there was a second motion? I know that's not necessarily needed because he could just bring it forward, but what if there was a second motion to bring that forward at the strategic, just to demonstrate that importance of at least continuing the conversation? Because I think regional conversations are certainly important, and this falls within that category.
Okay, thank you for that. My crystal ball is broken, and I couldn't possibly predict the future even 5 minutes from now. So what I might suggest is if all questions and comments have been exhausted, and Mayor Janung, your hand is still up, but I imagine, is that from before? Or is okay? Unless there are any further questions or comments or discussion on this particular motion, I wonder if we test calling this question, and then beyond that, we'll take what comes next, if that makes sense to everyone. And if there are no further questions or comments, I would ask for a vote on the motion that the committee recommend to the board that the policing subcommittee be dissolved. All those in favor? And any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we're now on the other side of that. Any further discussion or anything else anyone wishes to raise on that specific question, not to beat around the bush, whether we feel we'd like a motion to recommend to the board we do that. Councillor Putmans, I see your hand up. You want to go ahead?
Sorry, just to apologize, my camera wasn't working today.
No worries. Do you would you like to weigh in on this question of whether we discussed it at strat planning or elsewhere, or was that your hand up from a vote?
No, that was a hand up from the vote.
Okay, perfect. Councillor Petro, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. Just sitting here thinking about this, I actually kind of would like to make a motion so that we know for sure that it is going to be an item that's discussed at the strat planning, and that we're not just, not that our staff are not amazingly prepared all the time, but I never like just like, hey, let's talk about this now, even though we didn't talk about it before. So I think I'd love to have something official coming from today, just so that we know that it's on the agenda. People are prepared to talk about it when they get to that strat planning session. So that's just my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Reid Miller, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Chair Clark. I can appreciate maybe the motion, but it's a discussion item for our strategic planning session, and I don't think a motion is necessary, and I wouldn't be able to support it. I also think it's out of the scope of CMRB. However, I am happy to discuss it at a strat session. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so where does that leave us then? Mayor Jinung, you're up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to second Councillor Petro's motion, and with the understanding as you bring forward, Reid Miller, the discussion could be that it's out of the scope, and I think that we just need to put this to bed one way or the other. And I appreciate just the heads up, as Councillor Petro's outlined, that board members come prepared for that agenda item with it in advance, rather than say me bringing it up on the side of a table. That's really the nature of it. But I'm tending to agree with you and Councillor Koken about the mandate, but I just don't want it to get lost. That's all.
Okay, perfect. So Jamie, okay, so let's then Councillor Petro then. What I've written down here in terms of a motion, and I see Jamie, you've got your hand up as well, perhaps to weigh in, but the motion I wrote down, and please let me know if this captures what you have in mind, is that the committee recommend to the board that regional policing be added to the upcoming agenda for the strategic planning session, whatever grammatically works. And that's a motion. And Mayor Jinung, do you second that motion? Yes, that's a second. Okay, so that motion is now on the floor for discussion. Jamie, got your hand up, so we'll turn it over to you. Go ahead.
For what it's worth, and you guys, the committee can do what they wish, obviously, but we will bring it. We heard you today, you'd like to discuss regional policing, it will be on the agenda for the strat session, and we'll go from there. But just wanted to make sure you knew that we heard what you're saying, and that is all.
Okay, thank you very much. Reeve Koken, Deputy Reeve Koken, you're up. Keep trying to promote you, Don. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, as far as how much preparation administration have to do for this item to be on the strat planning session. Is the board expecting anything as far as any type of details to be able to properly vet the item?
Jamie, to you on that, how much work would it take to add this to the strat plan?
We're not likely to put any background discussion, because I really think that we'd need to hear what it is that the board needs to hear each other about what it is. The concern is how this can be helpful. What are the options to discuss among themselves? So for us, we will just have it as a line item and dedicate some time.
Okay, well, then I don't think that there's a motion required for this to be on there. I think the board members have the right to be able to put items on the agenda as required. And Jeff, if you want to put this on the board meeting for the strat planning session, I think go for it. I don't think we need a motion for it.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Petro or Mayor Janung, thoughts on whether we want to continue on with the motion? Mayor Thorne, we've got you up next.
Yeah, from my perspective, what I like about the motion is remaining is that it puts it on, like it actually sits on the agenda. If we wait for somebody to add it to the agenda, then not everybody comes prepared for that. So I hear Jamie saying she's going to put it on the agenda. So if that's going to be the case out of this discussion, it will get put on the agenda without us making a motion. I can agree there's no motion needed, but if we want a motion of how it ended up on the agenda, so that if it is questioned of why is it on the agenda, it is really clear that it came out of the governance committee.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Schmidt, go ahead.
Thank you. I would just like to echo that if, because the dissolving of the committee, if it does take it off of the radar, then this absolutely keeps it there for future discussion or for the next round of discussion. So that's why I put my hand up too.
Sorry, and you're saying you're speaking in favor of the motion then, that we should have
I
the
am.
motion? Or, yeah, okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've got Councillor Petro up next.
Thank you through the chair. Just want to say that I'm happy to continue to let this stand. I think Mayor Thorne made a good point on this, and I just wanted to make sure that it's official, because I know if I showed up at a meeting as an elected official who doesn't deal with policing and somebody said, hey, let's talk about policing, I would be very ill prepared for that. So just want to make sure that it's officially there. I also just wanted to point out that emergency services is listed as an item in the servicing plan section of our regulations. So it's a very relevant conversation for us to be having. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you so much for that. And any further hands up or discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll move then to a vote. Moved by Councillor Petro, seconded by Mayor Janung, that the committee recommend to the board that regional policing be added to the agenda for the upcoming strategic planning session. All those in favor of that motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And those opposed? 1, 2. All right, that carries 6-2. Great. Thank you very much for that. Okay, anything else on that? And if not, I think that exhausts agenda item number 8. Anything under round table now that we're wrapped up the rest of the agenda? And if there is nothing, our next meeting of this committee is the 8th of November. We've got a pretty busy October coming up, well, really busy next 6 weeks, 6-8 weeks for us. Board meeting next Friday, the 19th at 2 p.m. That will be online. It'll be a 2-hour meeting. We have, I think, a reasonably hefty agenda, so come prepared for some good discussion. Land use servicing will meet Thursday, 3rd of October, also online. And then our speaker series and board meeting and strat session, a full day together, the better part of the day together, Friday, 25th of October at the Confluence. And the governance committee, again, will meet on 8th of November, Friday, 9 a.m. online. With that, the agenda being exhausted, I declare the meeting terminated on the stroke of 10 a.m., 1 hour. Well done, everyone. Thank you so much for your input. I think we made some great progress today. Be well.